Listen up, and listen close. Crime's a dark and dirty road, and all that's waiting at the end is the jailhouse or the hangman's rope. Tonight's case starts with a house in flames and a body in the ashes. On paper, it seemed like your basic insurance lay, but the deeper I dug, the more I smelled something rotten. The trail led me through the charred and twisted remains of a life, and every stone I turned over just sparked more questions than answers. Who set the blaze? Who stood to gain? Well, somebody struck that match, and tonight it's our job to make sure they get their fingers burned. Tonight we solve the case of the Smokescreen Swindle. Fire. It burns bright enough to light up the darkest night, but can also destroy everything in its path. A classic case like this deserves a classic drink, and the old-fashioned certainly fits the bill. We'll start with sugar and bitters muddled together in the glass, like laying down the kindling that will carry the flames. A decent slug of bourbon creates the warmth of smoldering embers, but it's the twist of orange peel that gives us the bright spark that really sets the night ablaze. Fire burns hot, but facts are cold and hard, and somewhere in between lie the answers we seek. Let's get to work. Jim Tarr picked up the cigar, rolled across his desk, bit off an end, and reached for a match. "This ain't no nickel smoke," he said. "Guess you need a favor." Tarr was county sheriff. He never missed a chance for a sour crack, but I'd learned not to take it personal. "Wrong on both counts," I said. "These particular gaspers are two a dime, and I'm here to do you a favor, not ask for one. The company that insured Thornburg's house thinks it's arson." "Yeah, sounds about right," Tarr said. "Fire department says the lower part of the house was soaked in gasoline, though I've no idea how they figured that out. There's not a stick left standing. McClump's on it, but he hasn't found anything to get excited about, yet. What's the lay? All I know is there was a fire." Tarr leaned back, turned his red face to the ceiling, and bellowed, "Hey, Mac!" Now, the pearl push buttons on the sheriff's desk might as well have been decorative. Deputy Sheriff McClump appeared in the doorway, leaning there like it was holding him up. Tarr sized the deputy up. "We got a city slicker here to catch our firebug. Let's give him the rundown." McClump, a rangy, tow-headed kid with more nerve than energy, slouched into a chair. "Ain't the Lord good to us," he drawled. "Here's the setup. Thornburg's house was an old frame joint a couple miles out on the county road. Night before last, around midnight, Jeff Pringle, a neighbor half a mile east, saw a glow and called it in. Well, by the time the fire wagons arrived, there wasn't much left. Pringle was the first neighbor on the scene, and the roof had already caved. Nobody saw anything odd, no strangers hanging around. Thornburg's help barely escaped and couldn't say much. Too rattled, I guess. They saw Thornburg at his window before the fire took him. A local guy, Henderson, driving home from Wayton, also saw him just before the roof collapsed. The fire department found signs of gasoline, but the Kuntzes, Thornburg's help, swear there wasn't any gas on the property. Well, that's where we stand. "Thornburg got any family?" I asked, scratching notes into my old legal pad. "Niece in San Francisco, Mrs. Evelyn Trowbridge. She came up yesterday, but didn't have much to offer, so we sent her back home." "Where's Thornburg's help, the Kuntzes, now?" "In town, at a hotel on I Street." "Thornburg owned the house?" "Uh-huh. Bought it a couple months ago from Nooning and Weed." "Okay. Got anything on your plate this morning?" "Just this." "Good. Let's you and me go dig around a little." I told Tarr we'd be in contact when we had something, then we were out the door on the way to the Kuntzes hotel. Mr. Kuntz was a soft, plump man with a smooth, neutral face and genial manner of your garden variety manservant. His wife was tall, stringy, maybe a few years older than him. She mostly kept quiet while he did the talking. "We started with Mr. Thornburg on the 15th of June, I think," he said, answering my first question. "Came to Sacramento at the start of the month and put in applications at the Alice Employment Bureau. A couple of weeks later, they sent us to see him. He took us on." "Where'd you come from?" "Seattle, sir, with Mrs. Comerford." The weather didn't suit my wife's bronchial problems, so we decided on California. We'd have stayed in Seattle, though, if Mrs. Comerford hadn't had to give up her house. Divorce, you see. What do you know about Thornburg? Not much, sir. He wasn't the chatty type. Probably a retired sailor, judging by the way he carried himself. Didn't go out much. Only visitor he had was his niece once, and he didn't get any mail. He had a room next to his bedroom, set up like a workshop. Spent most of his time in there. I always figured he was working on some kind of invention, but he wouldn't let us near it. You got any idea what it was? No, sir. Never heard any noise or smelled anything. And his clothes were always clean, even when they went out for laundry. He was very particular about that, sir. Was he an old man? Couldn't have been over 50, sir. He stood very straight, and there was no gray in his hair or his beard. Ever have trouble with him? No, sir. He was peculiar, I'll give you that. He only cared about his meals, his clothes, as I mentioned, and not being disturbed. We hardly saw him during the day. All right, now about the fire. Tell us everything you remember. Well, sir, we went to bed around 10, our usual time, and went to sleep. Our room was on the second floor, rear side. Sometime later, I never did know exactly when, I woke up coughing. The room was full of smoke, and my wife was gasping for air. I jumped up, dragged her down the back stairs, and out the back door, just trying to get her out of there. When we were safe in the yard, I remembered Mr. Thornburg. I tried to get back in the house, but the first floor was already in flames. I ran around front to see if he'd got out, but didn't see him. The yard was lit up like daylight. Then I heard him scream, a horrible scream, sir. I can hear it still. I looked up at his window and saw him there, trying to get out, but the woodwork was burning. He screamed again, fell back, and the roof caved in right after. There was nothing he could have done. No, sir, no ladder, nothing. A gentleman left his car in the road and came up to where I was standing, but there was nothing either of us could do. The house was coming apart. So I focused on getting my wife away from the fire. That's all I know. Did you hear anything unusual early that night, or see anyone hanging around? No, sir. Any gasoline around? No, sir. Mr. Thornburg didn't have a car. None at all. No, sir, none at all, unless Mr. Thornburg kept it in his workshop. You got any idea what might have started the fire? No, sir. I was shocked when I heard it was set deliberately. I can't understand why anyone would do that. What's your take on him? I asked McClump as we left the hotel. They might cook the books, maybe even split with some of the fine silverware, but they don't strike me as killers. Yeah, that was my read too. But they were the only ones who'd been there when the fire started. Other than the guy who didn't make it out. Our next stop was the Alice Employment Bureau. We were told the Coonses walked in on June 2nd looking for work, with Mrs. Comerford in Seattle as their reference. Comerford's letter of recommendation said they'd been extremely satisfactory in every respect. Thornburg called the Bureau on June 13th, asking for a man and wife to keep house for him. Alice sent over a couple of pairs, but none worked out. The Coonses, however, were hired, despite Alice pushing the others. All that would certainly seem to indicate that the Coonses hadn't deliberately maneuvered themselves into the place, unless they were the luckiest people in the world. And luck and coincidence are two luxuries a detective can't afford. At the office of the real estate agents, Nooning and Weed, we were told that Thornburg had come in on the 11th of June. He'd been told that the house was for sale, had looked it over, and wanted to know the price. The deal had been closed the next morning, and he'd paid for the house with a check for $4,500 on the Siemens Bank of San Francisco. After lunch, Howard and I met Howard Henderson, the man who'd seen the fire while driving back from Wayton. Henderson, a big friendly salesman type, was all smiles until the subject turned to the fire. He'd been in Wayton playing pool with the grocer, left around 10:30 and spotted the glow in the sky near Tavender. The pump jockey at the garage told him to take the county road, and he arrived just in time to see Thornburg trying to break through the flames. Too late to save him. The roof collapsed right after the scream. Henderson helped Coons revive his wife, then stood there watching the fire burn out. He didn't see anyone on the road. What do you know about this Henderson character? I asked McClump when we were on the street. Came here from somewhere in the east, I think, early in the summer, to open that cleanser agency. Lives at the Garden Hotel. Where are we headed next? Let's go take a look at what's left of Thornburg's house. Now, the house was a fireberg's dream, hidden by tree-covered hills on 3 sides and an uninhabited plain on the 4th. McClump said no one used the county road. favoring the state highway to the north. The house was reduced to a heap of blackened ruins. We poked around the ashes a little, not expecting much, but it's human nature to sift through the wreckage. The garage had a few new scorch marks, but was fine otherwise. A shed with a few gardening tools and other odds and ends had escaped the fire entirely. The lawn and garden, about an acre in all, had been trampled by wagon wheels, plus the feet of firemen and gawkers getting a ghoulish thrill. After ruining our shoe shines, McClump and I decided to canvass the nearby houses. The nearest was that of Pringle, the man who'd sounded the alarm, but he knew nothing about the dead man, had never even met him. Mrs. Jabine, who lived about a mile to the south, had met him once. She'd taken care of the key to the house while it was vacant, and a day or two before Thornburg bought the place, he'd visited to ask about it. She'd gone there with him and showed him around, and he told her he was interested. He'd been alone, except for the chauffeur of the hired car from Sacramento, and hadn't told her much about himself. Miss Jabine went over to call on him after he moved in, just a neighborly visit, as she put it. But Coons had told her he wasn't home. Most of the neighbors had got the impression that Thornburg didn't care for visitors. The Coonses were described as pleasant enough to talk to, but, like their employer, not really the friendly type. McClump summed it up as we got back in the car. Anyone could have touched off that old tinderbox, but we don't have a damn thing showing any of them even knew Thornburg, let alone had a motive. I grunted agreement, and we pointed our machine towards Tavender, hoping we might find more answers there. Tavender turned out to be little more than a crossroads, a general store, post office, garage, church, and 6 houses, 2 miles from Thornburg's place. McClump knew Philo, the storekeeper and postmaster, a scrawny little man with a case of nerves. I never saw Thornburg, he said, never had any mail for him. Coons came in once a week for groceries. He'd walk in and I'd send the stuff in my car. Who drove the stuff out? My boy. Want to talk to him? The boy was a spitting image of the old man, just younger, obviously. He'd never seen Thornburg either, but his business never took him past the back room. Who's the night man at the garage, I asked. Billy Luce, he just went in a few minutes ago. We crossed the road and found Luce. Night before last, the night of fire. There was a man here talking to you when you first saw the flames? Luce stared up at the ceiling, fishing for a memory. Yeah, I remember now. He was heading to town. I told him if he took the county road instead of the state road, he'd see the fire. What kind of man was he? Middle-aged, big but kind of slouchy. Brown suit, wrinkled, baggy. Medium complexion? Yeah. Smile when he talked? Yeah, nice guy. Curly brown hair. Have a heart, Luce laughed. I didn't put him under a magnifying glass. Luce's description fit Henderson all right, but while we were at it, I thought we might as well make sure he'd been coming from Wayton. We gave that town 25 minutes of our time. 10 of them tracking down Hammersmith, the grocer Henderson claimed he'd shot pool with, 5 minutes finding the proprietor of the pool room, and 10 verifying Henderson's story. What do you think of it now, Mac? I asked as we rolled back towards Sacramento. The kid was too damn lazy to talk much, but when he did, he was smart enough to make you stop and listen. There ain't a hell of a lot to think, he said cheerfully. Henderson's out of it, if he ever was in it to begin with. There's nothing to show that anybody but the Coonses and Thornburg were there when the fire started. The Coonses ain't too honest looking, maybe, but they ain't killers, or I miss my guess. But the fact remains that they're the only bet we got so far. Maybe we ought to bring them in. All right, I agreed. I'll send a wire to Seattle and ask a contact there to get this Mrs. Comerford's view on them. Then I'm going to catch a train for San Francisco, see Thornburg's niece in the morning. Next morning, I found myself at a rather elaborate apartment building on California Street. I had to wait 3/4 of an hour for Mrs. Evelyn Trowbridge to dress. If I were any younger or a social caller, I might have been impressed by the tall, slender woman who finally walked in. Black dress clinging to her curves, black hair framing a pale face with big hazel eyes. But I wasn't either of those things. I was a cranky middle-aged detective, not in the mood to have his time wasted. Ever the professional, however, I put on a friendly face and got down to business. I need you to tell me everything about your uncle. Family, friends, enemies, business connections, the whole shebang. He had no family, she said. I'm it. Guess I'm the last one left standing. Where was he born? Here in San Francisco. I don't know the date, but he was about 50 years old, I think. What was his business? He went to sea when he was a boy, and so far as I know, always followed it until a few months ago. He a captain? I don't know. Sometimes I wouldn't see or hear him for several years, and he never talked about what he was doing, though he would mention some of the places he'd visited. Rio, Madagascar, Tobago. Then about 3 months ago, he came here and told me that he was through with wandering, that he was going to take a house in some quiet place where he could work undisturbed on some invention or other. He lived at the Francisco Hotel while he was here. After a couple of weeks, he suddenly disappeared. Then, about a month ago, I received a telegram asking me to come see him at his house near Sacramento. I went up the very next day, and I thought that he was acting very strange, very excited over something. He gave me a will that he'd just drawn up and some life insurance policies in which I was beneficiary. Immediately after, he insisted that I return home and hinted rather plainly that he didn't wish me to either visit him again or write until I heard from him. I never saw him again. What was this invention he was working on? I really don't know. He got excited and nervous, even suspicious when I asked. I never mentioned it again. Are you sure he followed the sea all those years? No, I'm not. I just took it for granted, but he may have been doing something altogether different. Was he ever married? Not as far as I know. Friends? Enemies? No, he didn't mention anyone. Okay. Last of all, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you this. Where were you the night of the fire? At home. I had some friends here to dinner, and they stayed until about midnight. Mr. and Mrs. Walker Kellogg, Mrs. John Dupree, and Mr. Kilmer, a lawyer. I can give you their addresses, or they're in the phone book if you want to question them. I allowed as how I might do just that. Then I left the lovely Mrs. Trowbridge to her own devices as I headed to the Francisco Hotel. Thornburg had been registered at the hotel from May 10th to June 13th. Hadn't attracted much attention. Staff remembered a tall, broad-shouldered man of about 50 with medium-length brown hair pushed straight back, a short, pointed brown beard, and healthy, ruddy complexion. Grave, quiet, punctilious in dress and manner, his hours had been regular, and he'd had no visitors that any of the hotel employees remembered. At the Seamen's Bank, I was told Thornburg had opened an account there on May 15th. A balance of a little more than $400 remained to his credit. The cancelled checks on hand were all of various and rather large life insurance policies. I jotted down the names of the companies and then headed back to the office. The reply to my Seattle telegram was waiting for me when I arrived. Mrs. Edward Comerford rented apartment at address you give on May 25, gave it up June 6. Trunks to San Francisco same day, check numbers GN45258 and 8 and 9. Tracing baggage is no trick at all, if you have the dates and check numbers to start with. A lesson a lot of would-be crooks have learned the hard way. And 25 minutes in the baggage room at the ferry and half an hour in the office of a transfer company gave me my answer. The trunks had been delivered to Evelyn Trowbridge's apartment. I got Jim Tarr on the phone and told him about it. Good shooting, he said, forgetting for once to indulge his legendary wit. We'll grab the Kuntzes here and Mrs. Trowbridge there, and that's the end of another mystery. Wait a minute, I cautioned him. It's not all straightened out yet. There's still a few kinks in the plot. Straight enough for me, I'm satisfied. You're the boss, but I think you're being a little hasty. I'm going to talk with the niece again. Give me a little time before you phone the police here to make the pinch. I'll hold her until they get here. Evelyn Trowbridge let me in this time, instead of the maid who'd opened the door for me in the morning. I let her pick out a seat, and then I selected one that was closer to either door than hers was. On the way, I planned a lot of innocent-sounding questions that'd get her all snarled up, but after taking a good look at her, leaning comfortably back in her chair, I discarded the trick stuff and came out cold turkey. Ever used the name Mrs. Edward Comerford? Oh, yes. Casual as a knot on the street. When? Often. You see, I happen to have been married not so long ago to Mr. Edward Comerford, so it's not really strange that I should have used the name. Use it in Seattle recently? I would suggest, she said sweetly, that if you're leading up to the references I gave Kuntz and his wife, you might save some time by coming right to it. It's fair enough, I said. Let's do that. She was a cool customer, all right. She might have been talking about the weather, or a book that hadn't interested her particularly, rather than a possible murder charge. During the time that Mr. Comerford and I were married, we lived in Seattle. After the divorce, I left and resumed my maiden name. The Kuntzes were in our employ, as I'm sure you already know. You'll find my former husband at the Chelsea Apartments, I think. Last summer, or late spring, I decided to return to Seattle. The truth of it is, I suppose all my personal affairs will be aired anyhow, that I thought perhaps Edward and I might patch things up, so I went back and took an apartment on Woodmansea Terrace. I telephoned the Kuntzes to make tentative arrangements in case Edward and I should reconcile, but Mr. Kuntz told me that they were going to California, so I gladly gave an excellent recommendation when I received a letter of inquiry from an employment bureau in Sacramento. Very nice, but if you'll permit me to finish, she interrupted. When I went to see my uncle in response to his telegram, I was surprised to find the Kuntzes in his house. Knowing my uncle's peculiarities, I cautioned the Kuntzes not to tell him that they'd been in my employ. He certainly would have discharged them, and just as certainly would have quarreled with me. He would have thought that I was having him spied on. Then, when Kuntz telephoned me after the fire, I knew that to admit that the Kuntzes had been formerly in my employ would cast suspicion on all three of us. So we foolishly agreed to say nothing about it and carry on the deception. That didn't sound all wrong, but it didn't sound all right either. I wish Tar had taken it easier and let us get a better line on these people before having them thrown in the coop. The coincidence of the Kuntzes stumbling onto my uncle's house is, I fancy, too much for your detecting instincts, she went on, as I didn't say anything. Am I to consider myself under arrest? Like I said, a cool customer. Not yet, I told her, but I'm afraid it's going to happen pretty soon. She smiled, a little mocking smile at that, and another when the doorbell rang. It was O'Hara from police headquarters. We turned the apartment upside down and inside out, but didn't find anything of importance except the will that she told me about, dated July 8th, and her uncle's life insurance policies. They were all dated between May 15th and June 10th, and added up to a little more than $200,000. Between the maid, the janitor, the manager of the apartments, and the names Mrs. Trowbridge had given me, I learned that she really had been entertaining friends on the night of the fire, until after 11 o'clock. Half an hour later, I was riding the short line back to Sacramento. Turned out the short line was kind of a rough ride. Between bumps, I tried to fit the pieces of the Thornburg puzzle together. The niece and the Kuntzes fit in somewhere, just nowhere we had them. In the beginning, we turned to them because there was no other direction to go, and now we had something on them, but a good lawyer could make hash of our case against them. The Kuntzes were in the county jail when I got to Sacramento. After some questioning, they admitted their connection with the niece, came through with stories that matched hers in every detail. Tar, McClump, and I sat around the sheriff's desk and argued. Those yarns are pipe dreams, the sheriff said. We got all three of them cold, and there's nothing else to it. They're as good as convicted of murder. McClump grinned derisively at his superior, then turned to me. Go on, you tell him about the holes in his little case. He ain't your boss, and he can't take it out on you later for being smarter than he is. Tar glared from one of us to the other. Well, spill it, you wise guys, he ordered. Our dope is, I told him, there's nothing to show that even Thornburg knew he was going to buy that house before the 10th of June, and that the Kuntzes were in town looking for work on the 2nd. Besides, it was only by luck that they got those jobs. The employment office sent two couples out there ahead of him. We'll take a chance on letting a jury figure that out. Yeah? You'll also take a chance on him figuring out that Thornburg, who seems to have been a nut all right, might have touched off the place himself? We got something on these people, Jim, but not enough to go in accord with them. How are you going to prove that when the Kuntzes were planted in Thornburg's house, if you can even prove they were, they and the Trowbridge woman knew he was going to load up with insurance policies? The sheriff spat disgustedly. You guys are the limit. You run around in circles, digging up the dope on these people until you get enough to hang them, and then you run around hunting for outs. What the hell's the matter with you now? I answered him from halfway to the door. The pieces were beginning to fit together under my skull. Go to run some more circles. Come on, Mac. McClump and I held a conference on the fly, and then I got a machine from the nearest garage, and we headed for Tavender. Looks like we're closing in on the truth sleuths. While I mix myself another drink, why don't you take a breath and gather your thoughts? I'll meet you back here once the smoke clears, and we can see if your theory holds water, or your whole case goes up in flames. We made time going out, and got there before the general store had closed for the night. Philo separated himself from two men who'd been shooting the breeze with and followed me to the rear of the store. Do you keep an itemized list of the laundry you handle? No, just the amounts. Let's look at Thornburg's. He produced a begrimed and rumpled account book, and we picked out the weekly items I wanted. $2.60, $3.10, $2.25, and so on. Got the last batch of laundry here? Yeah, he said. It just came out from the city today. I tore open the bundles, some sheets, pillowcases, tablecloths, towels, napkins, some feminine clothing, some shirts, collars, underwear, socks that were unmistakably Kuntz's. I thanked Philo while running back to the machine. Back in Sacramento again, McClump was waiting for me at the garage where I'd hired the car. Registered at the hotel on June 15th, rented the office on the 16th. I think he's in the hotel now. He greeted me. We hurried round the block to the Garden Hotel. Mr. Henderson went out a minute or two ago, the night clerk told us. He seems to be in a hurry. Know where he keeps his car? In the hotel garage around the corner. We were within 2 pavements of the garage when Henderson's automobile shot out and turned up the street. "Henderson!" I cried, trying to keep my voice level and smooth. He stepped on the gas and streaked away from us. "Want him?" McClump asked, and at my nod, stopped a passing roadster. We climbed aboard. McClump flashed his star at the bewildered driver and pointed out Henderson's dwindling tail light. The commandeered driver did his best, and we soon started gaining on the retreating vehicle. By the time we reached the outskirts of the city, we'd crawled up to within safe shooting distance, and I sent a bullet over the fleeing man's head. Just at the wrong minute, Henderson decided to look over his shoulder at us. An unevenness in the road twisted his wheels. His machine swayed, skidded, went over on its side. Almost immediately, from the heart of the tangle came a flash, and a bullet moaned past my ear. Another. And then, while I was still hunting for something to shoot at, McClump's ancient and battered revolver roared in my ear. Henderson was dead when we got to him. McClump's bullet had taken him over one eye. McClump spoke to me over the body. "I ain't an inquisitive fella, but I hope you mind telling me why I shot this guy. 'Cause he was Thornburg." He didn't say anything for about 5 minutes. Then, "I reckon that's right. How'd you guess it?" We were sitting beside the wreckage now, waiting for the police that we'd sent our commandeered chauffeur to phone for. "He had to be," I said, "when you think it all over. Funny we didn't hit on it before. All that stuff we were told about Thornburg had a fishy sound. Whiskers and an unknown profession, immaculate and working on a mysterious invention, very secretive and born in San Francisco where the fire wiped out all the old records, just the sort of fake that could be cooked up easily. Then nobody but the Kuntzes, Evelyn, Trowbridge, and Henderson ever saw him, except between the 10th of May and the middle of June, when he bought the house. The Kuntzes and the Trowbridge woman were tied up together in this affair somehow, we knew, so that left only Henderson to consider. You told me he came to Sacramento sometime early this summer, and the dates you got tonight show that he didn't come until after Thornburg had bought the house. All right, now compare Henderson with the descriptions we got of Thornburg. Both were about the same size and age and with the same color hair. The differences are all things that can be manufactured. Clothes, a little sunburn, and a month's growth of beard. Tonight, I went out to Tavender and took a look at the last batch of laundry, and there wasn't any that didn't fit the Kuntzes. And none of the bills all the way back were large enough for Thornburg to have been as careful about his clothes as we were told he was. It must be great to be a detective. McClump grinned as the police ambulance drove up. So, Thornburg faked his death and cooked up your run-of-the-mill insurance scam with his niece and the hired help. Guess we ain't gonna hang them folks for murder after all. No, but we oughtn't have any trouble convincing them of arson, plus conspiracy to defraud, and anything else that the prosecuting attorney can think of. Well, what do you know about that? Turns out we were chasing the same bird who supposedly died in the fire right at the start of the case. I prefer to bring him in alive, but sometimes tempers flare and bullets fly. It's all part of the job. Well, sleuths, this case might be closed, but the Gumshoe Vault remains open for business. Come by again some other night. We'll blow the dust off another case file, maybe mix a drink or two. Until then, keep your eyes open, your ears to the ground, and I'll see you when the next case comes.